Collectors, and welcome to a new series called Deck Building 101 through 102. I don't know how many episodes we're doing. I thought I'd put a series together about how I specifically build decks in Wixoss and what methodology I use to come about my decks. Um, I thought this might help some people because I think there are some people who usually just net deck, which is fine if you do, by the way. But if you wanted to go more in depth into why are these decisions being made, why would I use this, why is this maybe against what the Japanese meta is doing, what the differences are, this might be able to help answer those questions for you. And this might just be better to help you learn how to deck build in general. If, for example, you're trying to do a lesser represented L rig and you want to represent it, but you want to make it as viable as possible, what do you do? So before I even jump into the deck building process itself, what I actually do is I pull up a lot of resources. This kind of helps me just get prepped, and I do like almost like a resource and research phase that I do in order to try to understand what I want to build with. And this is before I actually put literally any cards into the deck itself. So the resources that I usually grab from are Facebook. If this is going to be, there's the WeCross TCG Global page where they release previews, English previews of cards. And this is sort of the initial phase that I use if I'm thinking, how do I build this new deck that's coming out? What do I want to do? If I am doing that process, generally speaking, I also might pull up the Wixoss, the Wixoss wiki, and on this you can find the things that have been released in Japan so far, and a pretty good extensive listing of all the different cards that are in it. This is a little annoying to navigate though when I'm looking for like specific things, like I need level 1 red Signy. Yeah, I've got the newest set that's coming out here that I can look at, and I absolutely read through the entirety of this before I move forward. But the way to do that is to use the card list that is actually WeCross branded and given out. And in this card list, you can actually search various things like I said, level 1 Signy. That's red. You can search here, and it will show you everything that's currently legal in the format. It won't show you the new stuff, but between this and then this, you are able to see everything that you're going to need to see for this set that's coming out. Should you want to just see everything in one go, you can also use the one that's in Japan. That is the Japanese page. All you need to do is go to takaratomi.co.jp, go to products, WeCross, and then find the card list there. Something that can help you navigate is you can auto-translate if you're on Google to English, and that'll help you out here as well. Now you're going to see a lot of this stuff is still in Japanese. If you just whoop, whoop, back into English, you'll be able to get it as you need. So the normal things that I'm doing when I'm looking for it is I hit the Diva button. This is just going to show only the format that's in the Diva format. And then I do different levels and different colors, and then usually I change to L-Rig, which is Ringaroo, Assist L-Rig, or Peace, or Signy Spell, those types of things here, and I click it. When it's in Japanese, I actually am able to short click it because I know where these locations are nowadays, but I also know that the double lines is the one that's Signy, and that's the one that I usually check for the most. You might ask, why do you even need this if you've got the other options? And the answer is there's another website called WeCrossBox. And if you use this, right, this is also in Japanese because it's a Japanese site. You can, it's WeCrossBox.com. You can go to English and then go over to your prize-winning Ringaroo. And then this will be in English again. And it's a little difficult to find exactly like what does what in English, right? So I'm going to hit click Yaka Yaka, which actually I think is Maho Maho, because of the weird thing that it's set up for. Yeah. And then that'll let me see all of the Maho Maho stuff that I can work with. You can see that Maho Maho wasn't that popular in Japan here. I actually specifically picked this one out because it's got less decks to use to make it a little easier for me to talk to you guys about deck building. But of course, there's other ones where there's going to be lots and lots of decks. Like, let's say you click Remember or something, and there's a ton and ton and ton of choices that you can look at. Something that I always try to remember is that the Japanese meta is not the same as the American meta, which means that some decks that are weaker in the Japanese meta might be stronger in the American meta, and vice versa. We use certain cards and certain tech that they don't use. Again, we're armed with hindsight that they're not armed with. So a lot of the times when an explosive deck might show up very late in the set's release, and we find out about it immediately, right? So we're countering a strategy that has already existed or something. Plus, it's important to recognize that the Japanese meta itself too is also kind of like the American meta in terms of there's a lot of randomness that also goes in place. Like some people aren't playing their favorite cards, aren't playing what's meta winning. So because of that, it changes the meta as well to American. So it's worth mentioning that this stuff is a good research point, but not a good like, let me steal this deck list, I'll be successful with it. Because there's also some of these stores are like only 4 people are playing their tournaments, so you can't really think that, oh, this will be the top notch playing thing here. I have, there's only like been 7 participants in it. But it'll give you a good start, and what it's worth, when you click into it, it is Twitter, right? So there's you don't have a clear example of to what is what. You're also going to get a bunch of future cards that you don't exactly know what it is, and this is where I was saying the Japanese site for Wixoss comes into play here. So you can go ahead and start cross-referencing the pictures that you get from here to try to figure out what it is. Like, yeah, I know this is Valaris, I know this is Tama, I know this is Anna Mirage, right? But what is this card over here? And you can clearly see this art. It's more difficult when you can't, and you got to make judgment calls and be like, oh, this is a white level 3 Signy clearly, so I have to put that in here, to go. All right, so I need a Signy that's a level 3 white, and then search for that, Diva format, and start going through it one by one till I can find it. I think it's in page 3. I actually know which one it is, so I'm trying to just zoom into it. Boop, 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 boop. Oh, that's at page 4. Nope, it's not in any of those pages. I'm just skipping all over the place, guys. You can tell I'm doing it live. It must be page 2. Come on, where is it? Huh. I am stumped as to where it could be. Maybe it's in page 1. Oh, here it is. I just keep skipping it because I'm looking at Lion. So you could be like, oh, here's Smoke, and it's 10,000, And a lot of times you'll get pictures that are potatoes and are even worse than this, so you can't figure out what exactly it is. So it's just worth mentioning that that's a good starting off point for research on this type of stuff. And then I also pull up what I'm going to deck build on. So you have 3 options, really. You can either deck build on a Google spreadsheet, which I don't love doing, but I've done before. There was other tools that were available. The other thing that you could do is you can pull up Cockatrice, and Cockatrice is really good with Tetris's plugin in order to get the Japanese cards in American, in English earlier, right? As well as, it's got like pre-Diva stuff as well. But for example, if I type in Maho 3, right? This doesn't exist in America yet, other than that one preview. So I can get all the information about what this card is here, and I can start deck building here. And that's actually inevitably what we're going to end up using, is this. But there's also another one. I know that Hellfire is currently working on a very cool version of a deck builder, and I actually like it a lot. It has a lot of it's friendly to mobile, for example. It also is. I've been working with him on stuff like, hey, when I'm looking in deck building, this is what I'm looking for. Can you add this type of thing in here? So he's done a lot to make this really friendly in terms of how a deck builder works. So definitely after this video's out, check this out. We're in beta right now, but I think by the time that it's available. It's going to be called DE Cross. You can start trying out decks here too. It also tracks like, what popular things are doing, who's making what, so I can be like, oh, someone's made a new Deus deck. Let me check that out, and I can go on here and check out the Deus deck. You can also check out like Lifeburst Podcast, which is me, and see what I've updated my deck lists to be and stuff too. And super 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 friendly. All right, let's get back to the actual building of stuff. So those are the resources that I pull up, and then the research that I do is sort of kind of nebulous. I wish there was a little bit more that I could say. I do Wixoss Box. I look at like some of those things, and generally speaking, what I do is on Wixoss Box, I look at like more of the later ones, and then I look at some of the more earlier ones, and I usually skip the middle chunk. Because I want to see where this deck maybe is refined and going to later down in the Japanese meta, and also where they've started off when it gets released for the first time. But I'm not really interested in the center chunk because that's just a lot of stuff that's like either a worser version of this or it's a better version of this. So I just like to look at the floor and ceiling that I'm looking at for this type of stuff. It also lets me be a little bit freer in my deck building because I'm not like, oh, obviously the right card choices are these. And I want to stress, not the right card choices, right? Everyone makes their own choices. Whether or not you make the right card choices based on your understanding of your meta and what you think is correct. So I pulled that up, and then the other thing that I do is I look at our current meta and what is our current popular decks, and like I take tech from that, right? So it's sort of a cumulative journey. The more decks you build, the more you understand the meta as a whole, the more you understand what you want to put into what and what is good, right? In a vacuum, you don't know that, all right, I'm playing a black deck, so I'm probably playing Phalaris, as one of the things. It has an enter ability that says put target Signy from your trash into the field. So you're like, all right, well, if I'm playing black, one of the best black cards that I can be playing right now is a Phalaris. Phalaris is a great silver bullet. I don't play very many of them, but I do want to play recursion effects, so that way I can get my Phalaris out when I need it. Hey, this is built-in recursion effect. I want to use that, kind of thing. So you know to build off of card choices off of previous decks that you've figured out in the meta. And a popular way to do that would be probably to look at the Lifeburst Podcast most recent deck lists. I keep those up to date with as much as I can with what's meta relevant. You can also go to the card game Discord and ask, like, what are the popular decks? What are they running right now? Does anyone have sample deck lists of those things? So you can get a little bit of an understanding of like what is good. The next research phase that I do is also just like the metagame in general, right? Like, what are the top decks that I think are the most powerful decks? I put regular tier list updates on my channel, so you can use that as probably a pretty good rule of thumb. It might be a little out of date when you check them, since I only really do them updated once before the meta sort of presents itself in the new set, and just my guesses, and then I do a more verified, all right, this is what I see people are playing, this is what people are telling me they're playing, this is what people are telling me is winning, for example. Something that I have a high hope with is that with Deck Across, with Hellfires, I didn't mention if it was Hellfires, but Hellfires, Deck Across, I am really excited because you can start inputting like this one first place or this one second place in my tournaments. And I think if enough people did that type of thing, we can start seeing a trend of a metagame, which would be very, very, very cool. But yeah, so Deck Across might have that in the future if you're watching this video like a year from now or something. The other thing that I do is, yeah, just look at the general metagame and decide, okay, how do I combat against that, and then after that I think about the card itself, right? And this is something that Anthony from my local meta taught me, is that all centers are really good, you just need to know what cards bring out the best of them, and you also just need to know like how to plug that in with an archetype and make it work most optimally. Now, that's not going to say that all archetypes are going to work optimally, and some L-rigs are better than others in terms of they have more flexibility. You can play them in an aggro deck, you can play them in a control deck like Tama, for example. But you're going to be you might be forced into certain archetypes based on the card itself. And that's sort of like the end of the research phase, right? Is that I look at the actual specific card that I'm trying to build a deck off of. This is the point where you need to decide whether or not you're building an archetype or you're building to beat the meta. And if you're doing that, you should be looking at centers that will allow you to pull off the game plan that you're doing. So let's say, for example, you are saying my meta is full of red aggro, white aggro, and some control decks, right? Then you got to think, how do I beat those things, right? And you go, all right, well, if I'm playing against nothing but various aggros, and these aggros are also enter denying me or enter burning me, I need to play some kind of deck that's a little low to the ground in terms of resources, or gains me more resources. And then you look at the control decks and you say, all right, well, there's some control decks here. These are all blue control decks. They draw a lot of cards and they filter and they grind out the game. Okay, so your best bet is probably to make an anti-control deck that also can grind out the game, so that way you can have a fair chance against your aggro decks. How do you do that? Okay, well, if I'm accumulating resources, green might be something I want then for resource gain. I'm going to also want blue because I want to draw more cards. This types of sort of running through things, and you start looking at it and you go like, okay, green centers that I want. Our choices are Senga or Bang, because Senga and Bang both get me card advantage as well as enter. And then you can then go from there, if that's the route that you're trying to do. But I think more people generally try to pick a center they perceive as powerful and build the best deck that they can around that deck, which is what we're going to move forward with. If you wanted to be doing the opposite, like I was saying, your best bet is to figure out the archetype that you're looking for and figure out what center best will allow that archetype to exist. Once you do that, we basically meet in the middle here and we say, okay, now I know I'm running a Senga deck. I'm going to build that Senga deck the best possible way that I can build the Senga deck with this archetype, right? We're doing this a little opposite here. We're going to look at the center. We're going to then pick an archetype based off of the center's ability. And then after that, we're going to go into the deck building into episode 2. And that is going to decide, all right, this is where they converge. We both do the same deck building now from here. So Maho Maho 3. We're going to take it from this card. Let's just read it out. It's a level 3 black Elric. That's already should tell you a lot about what you're planning on doing. You need to have black. Black does better in some archetypes than other archetypes. So that's something to think of, even just straight off without any more information. The next part we read is its auto is at the beginning of your attack phase. Your opponent chooses one of the following and performs it. Okay, so what we know from that is that it's at the beginning of attack phase, something happens. We're probably the more attack phases would be better than less attack phases. I know this is a stupid thing to think of, but you should be thinking about it, which means that maybe this deck already wants to go past a certain amount of threshold of turns. Maybe this isn't a turn 3 or 4 deck. This might be a turn 5 or 6 deck. So we can get repeated uses of this effect. Cool. We're looking at it now. We're seeing what the abilities are. Either A, 1, put the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck into the trash. Mill is good. Or 2, add target Signy from your trash to your hand. Now it says add target Signy from your trash to your hand. It doesn't say add black Signy, and it also doesn't say add target Signy without guard from your hand. Cool. So this already tells me a lot about what I'm looking to do with this deck. I'm not trying to aggro with this deck, because already I've decided I probably want multiple attack phases to get recurring uses of this effect, and if they pick one, I'm going to be getting natural damage towards them because it'll be a refresh damage. Maybe I can even potentially refresh the opponent out two times in the game. Refresh is really, really powerful because it enter denies them. It also denies them various free effects. But the second one is also really important because it means that you can get guards out of your trash, right? And that's something that's like, all right, cool. If the opponent's not letting me refresh them, I'm going to get guards out of my trash. That's going to mean I'm going to allow me to make the game go longer by preventing damage, right? And get multiple uses out of guards. I could even use less draw power in order to get extra guards because I will be able to bring back the guard to my hand multiple times. This means that potentially I can maybe even get upwards to, with enough filtering, 6 guard uses in a game, and that could be tremendous, So that's already where my head's moving towards, trying to figure out what I want to be doing to make this deck the best possible way. If I'm trying to do the aggro thing, the mill thing helps, but 4 is not a lot. I'll have to pack a lot of mill in the main deck to make it better. And then, I'm kind of going to be up a little bit of shit's creek when they say you can add target Signy to your hand, and I don't have anything to support me getting guards, so I'm just getting good value things that will then open lanes on my next turn. But black was already able to do that pretty efficiently from turn 3 onwards, so I don't think this is going to be an aggro deck, but you could make it work that way if you were going to do it. The next part is enter ability. It's free. Put target Signy from your trash to your hand. Again, this doesn't say guard, or say not to your hand specifically. So it doesn't say guard. You could put guard out there if you want. The guard is kind of worse on the field than it is in your hand, but you could if you need the enter for something. But it doesn't say black Signy either. It's any Signy, right? So it's unlimited recursion. So what I'm going to be trying to do is I want value Signy that are not just good on my turn, but also good on the opponent's turn. So I'm going to think about things like Remember, or mostly Exia, right? Exia is really, really good on the opponent's turn. And just being able to basically replay an Exia, even have a field of Exia, Ant Nest, or Exia, Yuki, or something like that is a really strong field to put out. So you might consider something Exia Succubi or something like that too, is also a really good one. So you might want to consider something like that. I'm already leaning myself into, I'm milling myself. I'm trying to get cards out of my trash. That kind of puts me in a white black sort of archetype that I'm looking at there when I'm thinking about that kind of thing. So that's where my initial thoughts out. Now let's finish out reading this card, which is action once a game. You perform the following 3 times. Your opponent puts the top 4 cards of their deck into their trash unless they discard a card or pay colorless. Now, if this basically enter burns my opponent by 3, I'm better off playing an aggro deck, because if I'm enter burning them by 3, I want them to not have the resources so I can close this game pretty quickly, right? It also says pay, so I believe this can't be Xenoclustered, which is kind of nice. So that's something that now pushes me towards maybe considering myself doing more of an aggro deck because of that, a red-black aggro deck likely. However, it's also the least powerful, right? It's the floor is that they're going to pay 3 enter and ignore your ability, which is not great. But if you can find a way to minimize how much enter they can pay, and instead that number is basically like, I don't know, the opponent puts 4 cards of their deck into their trash, discards a card, and pays 1, you're coming out on top with that one. Like, that's much better. Now, if you can get it so that they don't pay any enter, right? Instead, they put 4 from their deck into their trash, 4 from their deck into their trash, and discard a card. So mill 8, discard 1, or mill 4, discard 2. You are really up at that point. Like, at any modes of those are really good. So what we'll want is to find a way to minimize how much they can use the enter to pay for. Luckily, you also don't have to necessarily go red to punish opponents for enter. You can go white to punish opponents for enter. So that's something that I'm going to be thinking about, is I want to also maybe resource denial them with white. White has a lot of directly to trash effects that you might consider. And also, since we're playing a little bit of a longer game, we can kind of enter starve them a little bit in the early game by doing this kind of sort of attrition-y kind of thing. So I don't mind, right? And because this is a once a game action ability, which means that you can pull it on wherever it's possible, wherever it's best. You can pull this off on turn 3 when you've really been enter starving them out and forcing them to do the mill or the discard. Or you can wait till a little bit later game when we start going to a stall situation where they don't have the enter to pay for it either. So I think it's still better to run a white-black recursion mid-range type of archetype. And if you guys want a list of current archetypes that you can apply to, you can look at one of my latest videos called Archetypes in Wixoss. It gives you a little bit of a guide as to what to go for. The other options I would think of is you could probably go into a red-black aggro deck with this type of setup. And then really that once a game is one of your best things. You're using the mill to just incidental mill to just slowly refresh the opponent, at least get them 1 refresh, and then its enter ability is basically allowing you to put yourself into an advantageous position by recurring maybe Kentucky's or something that has assassin like that, over and over again, modems to strip the lanes open. I think that would be maybe a good choice if you decided you wanted to go into a more aggressive archetype for this. There's also a potential to do a more mono black mill archetype, but I think you want to avoid that with this just because all your mill is currently in your Elrig deck, and you're giving the opponent the chance to not be milled by it, so it allows your effects to go awry. Right, with these Punisher effects, you want to basically say, I want to put myself in a position where they can choose any of the options here, and I'm fine with it, because giving options to your opponents is probably the worst thing you can do in card games. Um, so I think a mono black mill is, even though it seems like this would be pretty good, I don't think this is where you want to be. I think you want your guaranteed mills to be in your Syst Elrig deck, and you want your guaranteed mills to be in, like, your piece, by the way, and your guaranteed mills to be like you recurring Phalaris to attack a couple times with the Phalaris. I don't think you want it in your center Elrig, especially if you're giving it your chance to your opponents to choose not to mill. I just don't think that's a great option. So again, I think you want to go with more of a red, black aggro, or you want to go with um, a white, a white black recursion mid range type of effect. I've decided I want to go with a white black recursion mid range for this deck. They probably want to splash blue, because then it will also put pressure on that discard to make them really go, oh shit, I really need to just I need to give up 12 cards from the top of my deck into my trash, right? That's the winner right there, especially with the auto ability, because then you're pressuring after that they don't want to mill anymore, so they'll allow you to put guards into your hand every turn. And by allowing you to put guards in your hand every turn, you can basically guarantee that you can grind into the late game continuously. I think this is the best way to do it, is force your opponents to make the decisions that benefit you the best. So that's the way that I'm going to go with it. Next episode, we'll go over the actual literal deck building process and what we want to go through with there.